Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hi everyone, and welcome to Room by Room, the Home Organisation Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element, with expert knowledge from professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Joustra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's get started. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today we're going to be talking about overcoming the challenges of eco-friendly building materials with Adrian Ramsay, and he is the design director of Adrian Ramsay Design House. Hi, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Gabriella, really lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I'd love to learn a little bit more about who you are and why you're joining us today.
Oh, cool. Who I am? Look, I've lived a life of design all around the world. As a person, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I've got two girls. I live in the Sunshine Coast of Australia, so I'm very blessed. But then in the design space, I've always been living a life of design. Right from when I left school, I worked in the design industry, worked in the clothing design industry for many years. And worked around the world globally as a designer and a design director. And then I'd always had a fascination for the built space and architecture. I'm dyslexic, so I couldn't go and study it. I couldn't get into university to study. So I pursued it without studying it and then started to study along the way of doing that. And I've been running this particular company for about 22 years. And I finished a major contract with an international clothing company and then went, you know what, it's time to do what I want to do, or more of what I want to do. So I decided that I'd move to Australia and I would actually start doing houses. And that's really the history of it. I'm not very good at much other than talking to people and drawing houses.
Oh, well, that's all we need you for today.
Perfect. I'm right in my lane.
Perfect. Great. Although it's funny that you say you moved back to Australia to pursue your dream, because I feel like a lot of people's dreams in Australia, at least, are to move away.
Yes. Well, I'm actually a Kiwi, so I'm from New Zealand. So I moved from New Zealand to Manchester in the United Kingdom and set up design for a clothing company and set up European design headquarters there and started that whole ball rolling. And when I was leaving there, I had in my contract that they could send me, I could choose to wherever I wanted to go in the world. And my fiance, she's also a Kiwi, but her parents and her family had lived in Australia for many years. And so we decided that Australia would be a good spot to go to. And it was warm and it was sunny and we could live there. There was no visa requirements or anything like that. So we came to the Sunshine Coast, first of all Brisbane, and then moved to the Sunshine Coast. And her parents still both live here, and my family's still in New Zealand other than a brother in Perth, who's also a designer and a photographer, but not
Perfect.
houses. Yeah.
And much better weather, I think, on the Sunshine Coast.
That's the attraction, 330 sunshine days a year. And the downside of that is that you don't get a lot of seasons, it's not seasonal. Like where you are in Melbourne, it's beautifully seasonal. You get heat and cold, but you also, and everything in one day, as people say about Melbourne, but you get the trees turn and it's pretty. And also like when we're considering, say, architecture, we get the weather changes, where here it's a lot more static. It changes, but nowhere near as dramatically.
I did actually go to New Zealand recently, and I was just in awe of the clouds, actually. I think they're very architectural and beautiful, whereas in Melbourne, they're very flat and grey.
Yes, well, that's true. New Zealand, Aotearoa, it means the land of the long white cloud. And you do get lots of clouds because your west coast and your east coast are so tightly held together that you get a weather system that's changing constantly. And the sky is a different colour from Australia as well. Like it's quite a different colour. I love going when I'm home in New Zealand. I still call it home. I haven't lived there for 25 years. I still love going when I'm home and just lying on the beach or lying on the hills and just watching the sky. I think because it anchors me to being a little boy, that when I did that when I was a kid and just watch the sky, you know, like just go and zone out somewhere and just watch the clouds move. I don't do that as much here. I watch the sky a lot. I've got a beautiful northern view from where I live and we see storms and things like that come through, but I don't have quite the same fascination. New Zealand is a beautiful country, though. Beautiful.
It is very beautiful.
So is Australia, just different. Yeah.
Different. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a section we call Have You Met Adrian? And that's where we get to know you through some of your favorite things.
Let's do it.
So, yes. So what is your favorite book?
Well, right now I'm reading a book called When by Daniel Pink. Now I'm dyslexic, so when I say reading, I'm stretching the truth a little. I'm listening. But it's When by Daniel Pink, and it's the most fascinating book because it talks about your biorhythms and cycles and when's the best time to be doing something, when your highs and lows and your peaks are, how to hack them, lots of clever stuff in there. So I'm really enjoying it. I wouldn't call it my favorite. My favorite is probably Yvonne Sherrard's Let My People Go Surfing, which is a business book. Yvonne Sherrard, it ties into my surfing. It's a business book, but Yvonne Sherrard started the company Patagonia and Patagonia Clothing Company. And of course, I don't know whether you know the recent news on that, but he handed the company and its profits are basically over to the betterment of mankind.
Wow, amazing.
So it's more in the foundation. So the values around it are, if people don't get to do the things that matter to them, then they'll stop doing the things that they need to do well. So Let My People Go Surfing is sort of like the idea is you go surfing if there's surf, but you don't let your job fall down. You know, your job still is in that picture and it's equally as important, and you've got to let the people around you work with you and vice versa, you know. So it's not letting go of the job and just, we'll surf any old time. It's like keeping both very conscious. So I love the ethics of it.
So it's like sort of keeping that balance between enjoying life and, you know, doing the things that you enjoy, but also, I guess, working as well.
Sure. Like some of the guys who work for me, I've got a couple of women who work for me, or I shouldn't say for me, really work with them. I think I work for them. And they've both got kids. And so if there's something happening at school, it's more important than work. Work can wait for the extra hour later, unless it's a meeting. But if there's something, you know, like who wants to be the mum or the dad that says, oh, well, I couldn't go and watch my kid play basketball, or I couldn't go and do these things. Work's a portion of your life, and it should have some flexibility around it so that you're getting a fuller, richer life. Yeah.
Definitely. Kids always going to come first.
Yeah, often they do. And, you know, you've got to like monitor it and be mindful of it. But like I leave work every Monday early because I go and watch my daughter play basketball, who's 13. Go and hang with that and just be a part of it. And I sponsor the team. So I'm lucky enough to do that. Buy them all ice blocks at the end. You know, it's a bunch of under 14-year-old girls that all play together, and it's an organized league. So yeah, work-life balance is part of making life worth living.
And what about a movie you've enjoyed recently?
Well, I just saw it for the second time on the weekend, and it's the movie Air, which is this Nike story of signing Michael Jordan, and it's Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are the main two actors in it, of course. And yeah, fascinating story. I knew the story already, but fascinating story and beautifully brought to you know, the screen. And I suppose because I love business and I love design, just seeing the risks they took and how true they were to themselves.
Interesting. I haven't really heard much of that story, so I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's one worth seeing, especially if you love. It's not so much about the sports; it's more about the passion for business and betting it against odds, and it paid off.
Interesting.
Would have been a different story if it hadn't.
Exactly. I think that's probably one of the most iconic shoes.
Sure, the Air Jordan. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't really know much about it. So
$4 billion worth of sales a year.
Wow.
In the Air Jordan range. So
wow.
Yeah. And it changed the industry as well. It changed all sports marketing industry changed from the deal that they did. It changed it in law even. So yeah.
Wow. So very influential as well then.
Yeah, really fascinating story.
Yeah. And do you listen to any podcasts?
Oh, God, I've got a list. I do for different things. I find that different podcasts and different podcasters, they give me different stories or different ways of telling stories. Obviously, things like Rich Roll. I think, when it comes to health and well-being and just your view on life, Rich Roll's really hard to beat. And so do millions of other people around the world because he's so well followed. Design Matters with Debbie Millman is another favorite of mine. She's one of the original podcasters ever. And she talks to really interesting, highly creative and high cognitive type people around design. Travis Bell, the bucket list guy. I don't know whether you've ever come across Travis, but he teaches people, he's got a coaching network that spreads around the world, and he teaches people to live a bucket list lifestyle. And that's not just traveling, it's all sorts of things. And one of my others is Eric Dillman's Pro Series, which is, Eric is a podcaster from Philadelphia, and he talks a lot to house and garden television stars and interior designers, which I find interesting as well. So yeah, I've got more, but those are my main ones. Second Studio Pod would be another one I'd drop in there. It's an architectural podcast, but yeah, there's a bunch.
Great, that's plenty for people to listen to. And I guess if they want more, they can message you.
100%, yeah.
And do you have a role model?
Oh, look, I do and I don't. Again, it's probably depends on what I'm doing more than anything as to who my role model is. If it's in business, I really love Bruce Campbell. Bruce Campbell's Entrepreneurial Business School. He's fascinating when it comes to business and ethics around business. Richard Petrie from the Architects Marketing Institute is, when I look at marketing, his way of thinking just always opens me up. I always go, yes. So when I'm trying to do something, I go, what would Richard do? When it comes to design, it depends on the type of structure I'm designing or the type of home I'm designing. But I might go, okay, if I was now sitting in the room with, choose someone like, say, Frank Lloyd Wright or Frank Gehry or somebody like that, what would they be saying I should do? And I don't use those two guys very often. I'd be more likely to use, say, if I was doing a farmhouse, I might say, what would Tim Blair from Blair Austin Studio be doing? What would Lauren Lease be doing? And try and put myself in their headspace and then go, how would they be asking these questions? So it's different. It changes per thing. Certainly in everything I'm looking for where the ethics and values are.
Interesting. I like how you have different role models for different things, because I think that, we can have a role model for one thing, but they're not necessarily going to be suited to some other area.
Yeah.
So, having a broad range means that you also get, a broad range of knowledge and a broad range of inspiration.
I think so. And what it does is when their ethics and their values are sort of aligned, the crossover is really easy. So that role model would do this, but you don't have to question whether the ethics or values aren't aligned. You just go, oh, yes. And so it's kind of a bit like friends. You have friends that push you in one direction or another direction, but they don't stick unless you've got some common values and some common ethics. And so, it's kind of similar, but you're trying to push yourself. I am. I go, how do I have the 5 people I'm around the most, or that I have the most contact with, how do I be better from what I'm learning from them? I just did a chat the other day with a guy called Ray Calavo, and he's from Seattle, amazing designer and architect, and just his journey and his way of view of life and what he tells you, how he tells you to look at things. He doesn't tell you how he describes looking at things. You learn from. So I have, depending on what I'm trying to achieve, there's somebody for it that I look up to or put myself in their shoes as such.
That's great. And has there been a course that has inspired you?
Many. One in particular I did a couple of years ago with Oz Architecture. I did a course with Glenn Murcutt, and it was a week-long immersive course with Glenn Murcutt and Rich LePellier and Britt Anderson and Peter Stutchbury from Stutchbury Architecture. And that it still, for the week that I spent with them, it still brings back conversations and thinking, not so much executing, but the thinking before executing with every project I draw. So, yeah.
Well, it's definitely inspired you when you're constantly drawing back on it, even years later.
Yeah, 100%.
Great.
Yep.
So how do you define home organization?
Well, disorganized. Look, I could answer the question in many ways. The first of all is, with a home, if we're looking at it from the architectural point of view, how is it organized on the site? And how is it organized for nature first? So whenever we build something, we're going to intrinsically change the piece of land that it's going on. Now, if it's a subdivision or something, the land's been changed, then it's orientation. So with designing homes, we're looking to put a bunch of boxes, they might be round, they might be square, whatever, stacked on top, laid out straight, whatever they are, a bunch of boxes, and fill them with light and air, and then people. And so when I look at the first part of that question, I go, what is nature telling me needs to happen in this space? Now, in a subdivision, it won't be as expansive as if it was a farm or if it was a large acreage. If it was slopey, if it's facing to the west versus if it's facing to the south. So that first piece of organization is what's nature requiring from me to make this a habitable space for people. The next part is what's the client requiring from me? And believe it or not, it does go in that order. What is the client requiring from me to make this a habitable space? What sort of emotions does it need to evoke? What kind of flow does it need to have? How do they live now? How will they live in 5, 10, 15, 25 years? If it's going to be in that home, what's the chapter of their life? How old are they? Where do they fit? Have they got kids? How do they live? Like, do they entertain a lot? And that forms the next part of organization. And then from that, take, for instance, if somebody's a messy person, just not particularly tidy. We either want to give them spaces to put stuff, but then they may just leave all the doors open. We don't know. Or we may want to give them a kitchen where you don't sit at a bench and watch them, but you may be able to see across a higher bench where you may lean or something, but then they can leave their mess behind there when they come and eat with you. Just those kinds of things, like how do you help them with their organization? If I walk them through the door and they're, say, right-handed, and say they're a woman and they've got a purse on, where are they going to take their purse to? Where is that going to go to? And how easy do I make that journey so that they don't just drop it wherever? If they're exceptionally tidy and maybe minimalist, then I've got to be thinking a lot about what are the few things that matter to them and where am I going to put those they'll be organized, they'll have habits, they'll be very habitual. They'll walk in, they'll put their keys on the right-hand side of the door or whatever it is, and do they want them viewable? So then we're playing with the interior space and the external architectural space. We're playing with both those things to match the people's habits that they really have. And often they're couples, so they have two sets. So in organizing a space, that would be how I define it. And if you want to look interior-wise or exterior-wise, they're slightly different, but overall they become one whole piece. Remember, the thing's going to stand there for, well, ideally over 100 years or more. So it's not going to be one person's space over time. It's going to be multiple people's space over time. So if you can get the core of it right, the rest of it's, dressing. It's like makeup and hair, or clothes. It's how you dress it. But if the core's right and it does a natural flow for most people, then it'll feel good when they first ever look at buying it. And then if there'll be something intrinsic that feels good, and then that flow will make it easy. And then from that, they'll start to fall in love with the way maybe the light comes in, maybe the separation between spaces, noise control, all those things. And we don't know why we fall in love with spaces, but we know we do.
And it's your job to
try and
figure
work
out why and how.
Or the individual. Yeah, 100%. Yep. That's the joy of the job.
So it seems like you really have to get to know each client and what they need each time you build something. And also the environment.
100%. Like, start with the environment, and then there'll be rules that, local bodies and councils and stuff have as well. So you start with the environment, and then you look at what those local rules and things are and know what our parameters we have to work within. And then it's a journey of learning the person. We don't draw it once, we draw it multiple times. Every one of them could be built. However, the thing is we're trying to build it right for you and your behaviors, habits. So yeah, the joy of the journey is a friend of mine, Jeffrey Dungan, said this to me years ago. I said something about Jeffrey, he's an architect in Alabama, and I said, you must do some beautiful, have some great projects, I think were the words I used. And he said, yeah, sure I do, He said, but it's not about great projects, it's about great people. And with great people come great projects. So you're going to get to know these people pretty intimately. We might be asking them what side of the bed they sleep on, how many times a night they get out of it, have they got kids? Are they having kids? What's the journey like for them in their life? So you're asking them some reasonably personal questions, especially around color as well. So, if we were working with you, we'd be going, okay, let's look at what different emotions color evokes for you and where do we want those in the home? And often we might look in your wardrobe as well and go, so why this and why this? Why does this make you feel this way? And then seeing if we can include that into the interior design and maybe even into the the design of the building, the architectural side of the building as well.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's a tight journey. So you want to like them and you want them to be open and honest with you.
Yeah. I imagine it'd be very hard to if you didn't have that click, if you didn't like the people you're working with, you really wouldn't feel motivated to make it something nice for them.
No, what it is that some people never will really open up, and that they're not really opening up. And so I always say it's a bit like fishing. We're throwing bait in the water and we're seeing which bits they bite on, and we're looking for that sparkle in their eye or that wrinkle of their nose or that, they just move back a fraction or they just move forward a fraction. We're looking at all the body language and going, that piece didn't land, and maybe asking them why. And just don't want to invade them. We just want to comfortably dig with them to find out more about them and where their magical part is. So if you find things like that you don't have say their ethics or something you don't like, yeah, we're We do all that before we sign a contract with them.
Mm.
We're digging on those things when we first ever talk and meet to see what the alignment's like and what kind of a client they're likely to be like.
Interesting.
Yeah, because otherwise it's a long journey, and look, you don't always get it right, but then you become the designer in the sense of that you do. Design is like a rigorous, exciting process. So you just do the best with what you've got, and that they'll allow you to do. You know, that's and the budget will allow.
Yeah. And what about some misconceptions about home organization?
I think people think it means putting stuff away or, having things in a certain manner, and it's a little bit more habitual about how people live. You know, if say, for instance, I have a thing where I go, if at all possible, if somebody has a walk-in robe, I make sure you can't view it from the bed, because you're looking into a whole bunch of clothing that's not necessarily, it's not like walking into a fashion boutique where it's all hung perfectly. It's, often overcrowded. It's, I like the way you're laughing at that, but it's all those things. How do you make it the most simple for them? But, and people say, well, what are you going to organize? Is this like Marie Kondo? Are you going to find what sparks joy and organize my closet? Well, no, we're not. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to look at it and go, can we take that out of your eye? And if we can, then that we know is going to drop a level of calmness to you. An example would be some people dress in their heads, some people dress when it's in front of them. If it's in front of them, then they're going to lift things off hangers and look, but they also don't want cupboard doors over everything, because then they can't remember where everything was. They're not visually as strong. Whereas other people go, today I want to, now they're still in bed. They go, today I'm going to feel like this, or this is how I feel when I wake up. And these are the clothes that emotionally support that. Well, I want to feel all business, so I want to dress sharp, or I want to feel all relaxed, so I dress more casually. So a lot of people go through those emotions every morning about what's the right choice for the day or for the evening afterwards, or whatever it is, what's that journey? So in organization, how do we support that? And how much privacy do we give them with that? Out of all the houses I've designed for young people and old people, I don't think I've ever met a woman who particularly wants to get dressed standing in front of her husband or her partner at the end of their bed. She doesn't want to walk out of the shower naked and do that. It's so you go, how do we organize the space so she doesn't have to? And the male would be either totally unaware of the fact that she doesn't like it, or excited that she would, so how do we organize these spaces so that that becomes comfortable and then gives them the privacy they need in the right spots? A well-organized kitchen is a joy. Yet if you go to your friend's place, 10 friends' places to cook, they'll all have them laid out differently, and you're still struggling to find a knife, yet yours is so logical to yourself that you go, why would you do it any other way? But they do. So misconceptions are that we all live the same. Yes.
or the opposite, where my mom will come over to my house and she'll open the exact right drawer, because she's the one who taught me where to put all of the knives.
You are a good daughter.
And then I go to my dad's place, I can't find anything. Yeah, I'm with you. I get that, it's just a different structural set of organization. So misconceptions are that we all do the same thing. We all, do similar things, but we don't do the same thing. And the nuances are what make it fabulous for us. Just left and right-handed. If somebody's left-handed in the house, how dominant are they in the space? Now, most of the world will have taught them that they have to work in a right-handed world. So what are the points that constantly still frustrate them in a right-handed world that we can take care of in their home? And not frustrate the right-handed people that live in their home as well. But
Yeah.
Interesting. I never thought about that.
Well, they already live in a frustrated world. Yeah.
I imagine, yeah. So our topic today is eco-friendly materials. So what are they? And what are they?
What are they? In the building space, there's quite a few eco-friendly materials. A lot of them are natural. And again, we come to this, like, you've got to decide on the purpose of what you're building. So like something like concrete isn't particularly eco-friendly, yet we use it and it's used a lot. If we're going to use unfriendly substances like concrete, we're using it for longevity and strength and price. So we're using it in that thing. So we could go perfectly pure and go, we will use no concrete. So which is possible to do. So then we might use steel screw piles, which obviously at some point would rust away into the ground and a long way away. That point, and the steel of them is really hard, so it doesn't. But they are still a natural product that can eventually disintegrate and go back to nature. We would lift everything off the ground to do that. We would use natural timber floors so that there's no glues and processing chemicals in there. But again, what we're doing is we're going, how eco-friendly is it when we just cleared a forest to do your floor and trucked it there? So kind of a cross combination of sustainability and eco-friendliness. We have a brand point that we call in our business called Artisan, and it's spelled art is in, not A-N-I-N. And one of the things with that is this is about making incredibly sustainable, eco-friendly homes. So we would use a material like rammed earth wherever possible. If we're doing that, rammed earth comes out of the ground. Now, if we're in a damper climate, we're still probably going to sit it on a concrete plinth, but we're minimizing the amount of concrete. We might take that concrete and we might say, okay, we'll underfloor heat it, but we might use a bore to underfloor heat it so that we're not putting photovoltaic panels on the roof, which are fantastic for sustainability and all that, except that they're really hard to recycle. So we would go, how do we make the house breathe? And how do we make the house maintain with mass its temperature efficiency? So rammed earth is a beautiful product for doing that. And maybe something like straw bale as well would be another beautiful product for doing that. We're heading down a road that sounds like we're hippies, and we go, well, we're not necessarily hippies. We're not trying to be hippies. What we're trying to be is people living in a modern age in a modern world. And also we've got less people who produce these products, with less people who, when I said produce them, not produce, construct them. So we've got to be very mindful of cost along the way with that as well. So it's kind of it's a balance, but like, look, if you just said sustainable materials would be, and eco-friendly materials would always be natural wood. They would be things like natural earth, like cob building or rammed earth, or straw bale. Maybe hempcrete would be another one. So we're playing a line of what's available and that people have the expertise to do. Stone is a natural material. Again, it's very eco-friendly. Steel is actually reasonably eco-friendly in the sense that it's not necessarily, depending on how it's being used and where, it's not dangerous to you. We're looking, like with our Artisan product, we're looking for where can the pieces of the structure of the house, as well as the internal layering of the house, nurture you as your human being wellness. How can it nurture you, not take from you? So a great example would be, we all love our carpeted floor when it's cold, yet carpet's made with might be pure wool carpet, but it's made with a hessian back, which again, it's fine, hessian back. But then we use some really toxic glues to glue it together. And then we take some man-made blow-and foam rubber and some plasticky type materials and lay that underneath it so it's nice and soft and spongy for us to walk on. those two things are gassing off constantly.
Really?
They're filling your environment with, so there's a thing called building biology, which I have a very good friend, Zara Dakota, who is a building biologist. And when you look at all the different things that are layering off, we can use paint that is in a higher VOC, so volatile organic compound. We want to find paints that have zero VOCs, so they're not gassing off into our environment. Everything that's chemical, I say to people, that beautiful new car smell? You buy a new car and it smells. That's just a chemical, shitstorm of plastics and things that are all man-made. And when they sit in the sun here in Queensland, that heats up and it radiates off more new car smell. But really what we're doing is having a very strong chemical smell. And then we go to people with autoimmune, disorders and things like that. And we're raising their sensitivities. So what we want to do is use things that are natural, like chalk paints and natural lime renders. Companies like Mineral Fox, where they do, or stoneware from companies like Eco Outdoors, where these companies, they're sourcing essentially like artisan products. Now, the price can go up because of it. What you're doing, though, is you're actually living in something that lives and breathes with you. And you need to be in an organic structure. And people wonder why often, they have sensitivities to certain things. So when we look at something like metal roofs, which we use them all the time, if we've got a metal roof, what are we doing with the electromagnetic fields of the home? What's happening at that point? That's when I said about steel before, structural steel and stuff. What are we accelerating those? And we're living we walk outside and we're living in a Wi-Fi world. It's beamed across us the whole time. If we go back, probably maybe 30 years? I don't think we have mobile phones. Maybe we did 30 years ago. 40, probably not.
Yeah, I think 30 years ago, just the beginnings.
Just the start. So,
yeah.
And there was no Wi-Fi, but we did have that. But prior to that, all we had was radio waves, and we know they can be damaging. And I'm not saying, look, everything's trying to kill us. What I'm saying is how do you unlayer it? And eco-friendly products are things like, say, wharf timbers, or recycled timbers. Well, they are until the wharf was, one that had oil tankers tied up to it and it soaked all the oil and diesel into it. Or it was on a fence where the guy was, spraying the farm with, Roundup, and it's still got the residuals of that in it. So being mindful of what these things are, because sustainability would tell you that the most sustainable home is one that's already built.
Yeah.
Because it's used its resources. To make it eco-friendly, we would be looking at lots of things where we would take out stuff and then layer it in with natural products. And that means that the palette of choices gets narrower and it's less commercially used, which usually means that it gets more expensive. And there's less people who know how to execute it, so they become artisans and they become well sought after. And again, so we end up in this layered effect of cost. So my argument is just build smaller and smaller, because we overbuild so much. Build smaller and better every time would be my argument. Like you don't need to live in, and I shouldn't say need, some people do need to. If you need to live in 1,000 square meter home, then great. But a price tag comes with that. And if you want to compromise on the size for your health, then go down that road. But
so I do have
your choices are yours.
I do have a few questions of what you've spoken about. So I guess first of all, so you're saying that sustainability and eco-friendly are a little bit different. And eco-friendly is more about what is natural and what's good for us.
Yes.
Okay, but
when it breaks down.
When it breaks down.
Yeah.
But not everything that's natural is good for us.
Oh, 100% not.
So you can't, it's just because something is natural doesn't mean it is eco-friendly then.
No, 100%, you're right. Like right down to certain kinds of rocks, all sorts of things have different values in them that we don't want to necessarily be around. So yeah, when you come to, say, building or design, interior design, sorry, there are products that are true, tried, tested, and that are eco-friendly. So like if I said to you, we'll use rammed earth. If you went backwards from that, rammed earth has maybe, it depends on the rammed earth substance, but I won't go into the technical side of it, but it has an amount of cement in it. And that cement isn't what we would call eco-friendly. So reducing the amount of cement, or if you're 3D printing a house, so everybody goes, they're printed in concrete. Yes, they are printed partially in concrete, but the mixtures that they use may use a lot less cement than you would if you were building them out of either a tilt slab or a off-form concrete, so where you pour between two shutters of formwork. The fact is that most people don't live in anything that has, or say concrete block would be another one. No, but not many people live in something that has all that concrete structure in it. And if they do, it tends to be a bigger space. So they may be exposing themselves more highly because they're in a structure like that, and there's so much more of it. But when you go to, say, 3D printed materials or rammed earth, the amount of cement's way down compared to if it was just natural concrete. So it's a balancing fact of that, and getting enough longevity out of it for it as well. So there's the sustainable part versus the eco part. Really, you just live sitting under a tree, like that would be the most eco-friendly environment you could probably find.
But it might be a bit wet.
Yeah, and there's ants and bugs and yeah. So it's a balancing act of both all the way. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like there's definitely a lot to think about, and so cost, as you said, longevity, what's good for you, but what's affordable. A lot of things to think about. And what are some other misconceptions about these materials?
Eco-friendly ones, what you said before is a large one, that everything's eco-friendly if it's natural. It's not. That's a very common one. The other is that it will be expensive, and it doesn't have to be. Often it might not be the expense of the product, but it will be the expense of having it placed and put in place. So that can be two different things there. Like you could go and learn to build a rammed earth house yourself and build it yourself, and you could learn to build a cob wall home and build it yourself, or like in the desert in Arizona and stuff, where you've got, or Nevada, where you've got like homes built of old mothership berth type homes where they're built from old tires. So there's nothing eco-friendly about an old rubber tire that's full of oil and compounds. However, once it's inert and it's held in space, it probably becomes quite a sustainable building product. And if you plaster it over on the internals with natural earth renders, again, you're probably at the eco-friendly part where it's working. And it's that degree. So the misconception is that it's that all products are eco-friendly, or that you might find the product's eco-friendly, but the way that it gets installed isn't. And so it leaves behind a residue, or it leaves behind something. A lot of things these days are glued. And so it gives surety to it holding on for a period of time, but then we're sticking it together with like chemicals. So yeah, tiles are a lovely eco-friendly product in the sense that a lot of tiles are made just with clay. They're really simple. The glazes, if they're glazed with glass, which might give them their waterproofness and stuff, if they're glazed with glass, then again, it's relatively eco-friendly. And for you to live in, it's very eco-friendly, you know, it's not going to harm you. But natural stone would be equally as good, but don't mess it up by putting the wrong glue behind it. And it might be that you've made it inert and separated it from yourself. It doesn't mean then that it's not going to harm the planet later or it's going to become a further problem. Solar would be another great example. Photovoltaic panels, it's like the argument around solar EV vehicles, you know, the batteries, how do you recycle them? So yeah, eco-friendly is a big can of worms.
Yeah.
But opening it up in that sense is what are the things that you can do easily? What are the things that you could make decisions on easily? And what do we have to do to get to those? And we have star ratings on homes for a reason, which is we're aiming for higher, what we call star ratings, which is energy efficiency and the use of the home. So generally the fastest way to get a higher star rating, or the harder way to not get one, is to take it off the ground. So it ends up with air underneath it instead of it being built on the ground. If we build it on the ground that has timber floor, it's usually got a concrete slab and then a timber floor, because otherwise the timber just rots out. And that timber floor would often have another layer of board underneath it, which would be plywood. That plywood would be glued together and it would give it lots of strength and stability, and then we would glue on the boards that are going on top. Not always. We might just secretly nail them on. But those boards are then coated with maybe an acrylic wax would be good. Or if they were left just oiled, be careful of the oil. But you can see the layering effect that we're doing. And then when we get to the wall, what are we doing with the wall, and what's in the wall surface? So if it's all timber, then that's one thing. Sustainability is a question, but if it's all timber, then what's it coated with? If it's gyprock, as we would use often with a wall, we've got two lots of paper. Both of them will be treated in a certain way. And then we've got gypsum plaster between them. It's not necessarily gassing off in a terrible way or anything else, but if we put the wrong paint on it, we might really be affecting ourselves. If, say, we decide we're going to use a beautiful, say something like a mineral box type render, which would be a natural clay-based render, then what is the substrate we're putting that on? Because if we're putting that natural clay-based render onto a sheet of fibre cement board, we've got this sheet of board which is actually not necessarily eco-friendly, and then we're covering it up with something that breathes naturally and is beautiful. So it's a layered conversation. And, you know, building biology is a relatively new area that people are tapping into. And this is all part of the conversation of building biology, that you go into more depth around these things. And then it's got, you know, it's like I want to say like a centipede. Each arm and leg points to a different direction as to whether it's eco-friendly. And I look at it and I go, step back. Is it going to nurture me as the human being, or is it going to take something from me? And if it's going to take something from me, we don't really have a model that says how badly will it take it. But if you're going to put carpet down, then what's your underlay? And then what's your, what sort of carpet is it? You know, is it going to create static electricity? Is it going to be, you know, wall? What is it going to be? And looking for the thing that has the least VOCs and the least amount of compounds that can gas off into your atmosphere that you live in and sleep in and breathe in is worth considering. It is a really good example of EMFs. Lots of people have a bed, sits against the wall, and on either side of it, there's a power point, and chances are that there's a wire that runs from one power point to the other power point right behind your head. Now, the electricity's in there. It's there because it's until you turn it on and something goes, yeah? We don't want that. We don't want that to be how you're sleeping with an electrical current running behind your head. We know it's not good for you. So we still may want those different power points. How do we get the electricity to them so that they're not running behind your head? You see how I'm like... Yeah. It's a deep philosophy of why would we put a garage attached to a house where we drive in, a bit different with the, EV vehicles, but why would we drive into a garage, and we'll have all experienced this, somebody drives into the garage or they're going to leave and they leave the car running for a bit longer, they open the garage door to walk into the house, and you go, oh, that stinks, because all the fumes came in. Why would we put ourselves with carbon monoxide that close to us? Why would we put it right where we live, eat, whatever else? Why wouldn't all garages be separated? And there's a reason for it, but we want the convenience, and we don't have the block sizes often not to. So how do we better make that so that that isn't a problem, so that we're lessening the problem, because we might not be able to solve it? How do we vent the garage? Most garages have a door that leaks a bit of air underneath it and maybe a window that's closed. So how do we vent that space so that it's a healthier space for the home?
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot in design, eh?
I was going to say, there's so much to think about. Like, I was like, okay, I understand the walls, I understand carpet, I understand some of these things. And then you bring in another topic, which is garage. And I'm thinking, how many more aspects, if you're building a home or designing a home, how many more aspects do you have to think about to create an eco-friendly house? It seems like a lot of them.
There is. There is.
And yeah. I guess that's why you get a designer to come and think about these things for you.
Well, yeah, and also lots of designers don't want to really even think that hard. I think the joy is in knowing that, having the knowledge and using it to the best of your ability as the designer, but you don't have to force every client down the rabbit hole of this is what it needs to be. Do you know what I mean? Like, when we're not, whilst we're here to educate and take people on a journey, we're here to be with the people, not force them to be with us. And it's finding enough common values, and the budget's always going to be an overriding factor. That's part of the brief, is how do we get it as close to the budget as possible with all the dreams and wishes in it, and look after the land along the way, and ideally build something that's eco-friendly and also has a lot of longevity, so that we're being sustainable, because we are going to alter the landscape and we are going to use resources. So let's not bulldoze it in 25 years and do it all over again.
So would you ever take on a design where you're using an existing house and redesigning it?
Oh, probably somewhere around about, it swings and roundabouts, but somewhere between 60 and 40% of our work always is to do that. Take an existing structure and either make additions to it or reconfigure it to work better for now. You know, you said to me before about your mum, and you know, you were the good daughter who just lays the kitchen out the same so she knows what she's doing there. She taught you her habits and they match yours, or yours match hers, more to the point. How your mum grew up in the homes that she grew up in and her grandparents grew up in are probably very different from the houses you've grown up in, or that you've grown up in and now live in, and the environment. You know, if we think in Australia, 60 years ago, the average Australian lived in a very small, like maybe 130 square meter home, something like this. Garage, maybe. Go 80 years ago, there was probably no garage. Not enough people had cars. And if it was added on to the side, not included in it. So you start looking like that and you go, man, we've shifted a long way in our expectation of what a home has to deliver. And people, I don't know whether it's by nature of people or by nature of commerce, people want more. And so, you know, who did you know who had a butler's pantry, you know, years ago? And who do you know today who has a butler?
No.
Yeah, exactly. Yet people build butler's pantries all the time when they could probably save that floor space and have a better organized kitchen. You come back to that first question about, you know, what's organization? Could you have, like, this is something we do in a lot of homes. We have a place, a desk. So a male-female couple or a female-female couple, not so much male-male, we don't do it for there, but for the others, we go, here's a space where you can actually sit and put your makeup on, and you don't lean over the basin, and you can do your hair in this space. You can, you know, but you sit and do it. You don't have to stand and lean over awkwardly, drop things in the basin, all those things. How do we do that? How do we shape the mirror? We position the mirror so it reflects the light into your face. How do we do the lighting? That's the organization part. And also then take eco-friendliness. Our circadian rhythms are affected by different values of LED light. So you've got a blue light filter on your computer or on your phone, maybe. The reason,
yeah, I do.
There you go. The reason is because it affects your circadian rhythms. And if you're exposed to LED light constantly, it shifts your ability to sleep well. So that's why we have blue light filters. And different lights have different values around that, without getting really technical on it, but different values around that. And we can choose ones with better ones. Some of them are cognitive and they feed us good energy, and some of them aren't cognitive and they rob us. And again, it comes down to price and availability. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So many things to think about. And not just eco-friendly, but just the whole house. Is there anything that we've missed that you wanted to talk about today?
Oh, I think probably not, but you know, take a simple premise of you're going to have a home, and say it's an existing home. Most people can find shortcomings with their existing home. And you go, okay, cool. What needs to be done? What's able to be done? And then in this hierarchy of needs and what the house can deliver on, are we starting in the right house? Or should you just move house? It's the first question I always ask. Is this house going to be able to meet your dreams? And if it is, are we going to be able to get there for your budget? Most people's budget is too small for their dreams. If it wasn't, I would say go and dream harder. You know, allow yourself to really dream. We shouldn't be able, it wouldn't be called dreams if it wasn't out of our reach. So we want to discover the dreams, and then we want to rationalize those to our budget and our needs. With houses, I still think that we overbuild too much in space, and we disengage nature too often in doing that. If we're looking at those as a premise to how we start or design a place, whether it be, you know, in a cold climate or a warm climate, what does the size need to be, and what do we protect? Houses are all about shelter and security. What does the size need to be, and where does it need to sit on that piece of land, and how does it need to give you as the occupant security and shelter? And so if we start from there and then we go with what does it need to be in size? What does it need to be for this part of your life, another part of your life, another part of your life? So it's all about this questioning at the start. If it's an existing house, again, what does it need to be? Are we just trying to meet the market of the Joneses next door, whose house is 3 times as big as ours? You know, what kind of race are we in? So yeah, and in general, I think that's the most fascinating thing that you could ever take on is to design places with the complexity of humans and the complexity of nature and the land and materials. And when you get it, probably even 90% right, it's joyful and it's and it delivers back. And renovations, by all means, the most sustainable house is a house that's already built. What can we do to make it last and utilize all the energy and all the organization that's gone into having it already? What can we do with that?
Definitely.
Right.
And what is something that you do in your own work and in your own home maybe to incorporate this ethos, the eco-friendly practices?
Oh, lots of bits and pieces, and I'm like, I live in a renovated house, so it's a house that we renovated. It's an older house. It has some walls that still need to be torn down and more insulation put in. But as we renew pieces of it, very focused on what kind of paints we use, what kind of wall claddings we use. EMF-wise, not as much, because certainly things like we'd never run a wire behind our head in bed and things like that. Very mindful of where those things are positioned and how we do it. My home is off the ground, so you can crawl underneath it. It's not well insulated from underneath, but it's not particularly drafty or cold where I live anyway. Things like that, I go, okay, well, where do we, if we want to do something, how do we do it the most sustainable way? And then also, how do we use the most friendly product available to us? Our home, we live with the doors open 9 months of the year, maybe
I
longer.
love that.
Yeah, it's, like we do, we close the doors for a couple of months when it gets cold. We've got a fireplace, which, again, possibly not eco-friendly because it's a wood-burning fireplace, but it is eco-friendly in the fact that it's a firebox and it heats this particular area. But it's very romantic. It's lovely to have a fire going. And so the trade-off is on things like that. And then we have family with farms, and they've always got clearing of logs and stuff like that. Windfalls of trees and stuff. So often we would end up with wood from them, hardwoods and stuff, and that we're burning. So yeah, eco-friendly maybe not, because you're putting all that smoke into the atmosphere.
But
romantic
sort of
and cozy. Yeah, somewhat sustainable. Yeah. Probably a lot better than driving around in my car,
Yes. Unfortunately, I think sometimes it is necessary, though.
There is, and this is the thing of trying to find that nice balance. Do what you can do for yourself, and, certainly use paints and those surfaces that you touch with carpets and stuff. If you can't get away from having, woolen, not woolen, but hessian backs with glues and things like that, well, then at least use wool with the top of it. And that, for some people, if you're an asthmatic or something, you probably don't want carpet at all. So there's it's a constant layering effect.
And so we've got some questions from the audience as well.
Cool.
So our first question is, will my house last as long if I build it with eco-friendly materials?
Yes and no, is the answer here. The reason being is that, say, for instance, you built it out of rammed earth, but rammed earth wasn't applicable for your climate space. It's applicable for many, but then there's tricks about how you would build with it in different climates. The answer is no, it wouldn't. Build it in the right space, in the right climate, and the right with the right methods. It'll be there for thousands of years. So
it's about picking the right places and techniques.
Yep, 100%. There's a bunch of wood out there which is when you're thinking about building with eco-friendly materials, it's called Akoya is the brand name of it, but it's a radiata pine, and it's pickled in vinegar, and then you can leave that sitting under the water for years and years and years and years and years, and it won't degrade. And if you ever come to Noosa, there's a big boardwalk that goes around up over the Noosa Point and stuff. That's all built out of Akoya wood. So it's lightweight, it's radiata pine, so it's sustainably farmed, so it's farmed as opposed to being, old forest. So it's not a hardwood. It's fast growing. It can be pickled with a very special process, and it lasts. The vinegar's not going to harm you. In the UK, they use it a lot for timber window frames and things like that. It's expensive. There's the trade-off. But yes, eco-friendly materials used properly with the right purpose, with the right roof overhangs, with the right separations from the ground, etc., will last equally as long as anything else, if not longer.
Great. And I'm loving the idea of just a big jar of trees in vinegar.
I like that. I've got that picture in my mind now, Yeah, I like that.
That's unfortunately all I was thinking of.
That's great. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all good. Everybody's got it in their mind now. Yeah.
Exactly. So our second question is, can I live in a modern house with all the latest technology and still have it be eco-friendly?
Yes, you can, definitely. Your tolerance to EMFs might be the biggest thing that you need to be very mindful of and what you're doing for that. So EMFs is electronic magnetic fields or electrical magnetic fields, and they have an effect over us as humans. I would say often the Wi-Fi is probably your biggest problem, is what the Wi-Fi is doing. But you could be living 10 feet from a cell tower. So it's, you need to have those things tested depending on where your house is going to be. Wi-Fi would probably be one of the bigger ones. And then there are ways of working with dampening EMFs with different screening types of things. And that would probably be my one that I'd warn you about most.
Okay, interesting. And our third question is, can I build or buy an eco-friendly apartment?
Goodness, I don't know. You could build, definitely. And it means that the builder, or let's just go down the road of, so we've got a developer. So if you chose to be a developer and you chose to only build eco-friendly and it was an apartment block that you're going to build, 100% you can. If you are looking to buy an eco-friendly apartment, I think you'd find there are more eco-friendly apartments and less eco-friendly apartments. You want to dig into the ethos of, first of all, the developer and their ethics, and then also into the builder. And to really know, you pretty much would want to have it a list of every material in there. Or you could get a building biologist to, say you were looking at 10 different apartments, they could come and assess each apartment for you and tell you which ones are going to be more dangerous than others and what kinds of things, because you might have a low sensitivity to one thing but a high sensitivity to another. That would be my advice, would be get a building biologist and get them to check that out for you before you purchase.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Yes, I'll be looking into that. So we're going to skip the open mic today just because we've almost run out of time.
That's because I talk so much.
That's okay. That's what we're here for.
It's a podcast, yeah.
So if our listeners want to find out more about you, where should they find you? Like a website, social media?
Sure. They'll definitely find me on Instagram under Adrian Ramsay. They'll find me on Facebook the same way. LinkedIn, of course, those main platforms they'll find me. Instagram's probably our most active of those. We have some on TikTok and stuff like that as well. I say we because it's the royal we. I've got no idea where it all is. They will also find me on TALKdesign.show. So my website is ardesignhouse.com, no AU, just .com. And then I have a podcast, which is talking to creatives and unlocking creatives around the world. So people who change our thinking, our world with thinking and design. That's called TALKdesign.show. And you'll find that also on every major platform that we send out on, or that is there to be sent out on. And also we've got, well, that's probably enough, really. Those are the main ones. We've got our own website. We've got our social media. We've got Talk Design. On Instagram, Talk Design is called Talk Design with. But everywhere else, it's just Talk Design, or the website for it's talkdesign.show. So I'm not that hard to find.
Yep, great. And we will put those links in the show notes so everyone can find them.
Awesome.
They don't have to search too hard for them. Great, thank you. I'll be listening to your podcast, see if I learn anything new.
Hopefully you will.
I probably will. I don't know much about design or anything, so.
It'll be from one of my guests more than from me. Yeah.
Yes, I've already learned everything I can from you. I'm sure that's not the case. But thank you so much for joining me today. Learned a lot. We'll continue to learn a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabriella. It was a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Room by Room, produced by the Home Organisation Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, and any other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating, sharing, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people to find it so we can grow and continue to bring you quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website, ho.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Joustra, and thanks for tuning in.